Cognitive impairments. As a first responder, you may be in a position to assist a person with a cognitive impairment. Cognitive impairments can be associated with a number of different conditions, including autism spectrum disorder, intellectual and developmental disabilities such as Down syndrome, a pre-existing traumatic brain injury, mental illness, and dementia. Although the life experience of a person with a mental illness may be quite different than that of a person with Down syndrome, both experience cognitive impairments that affect thinking, feeling, and behavior. People with cognitive impairments represent a vulnerable and highly stigmatized population. Often, these individuals are more susceptible to the negative effects of stress, so it is helpful to know that emergency situations may be exceptionally upsetting to people with cognitive impairments. Here are some other things to keep in mind when assisting people with cognitive impairments. As you arrive on the scene, check to be sure the person is away from potential hazards or dangers, such as a busy street. Some people with cognitive impairments may not have a fear of danger or understand that they are in a hazardous location. Some people with cognitive impairments may not show obvious indications of pain. Check the individual for injuries. If a person does not respond to you in the way you expect, do not assume hostile intent. The response may be a result of fear and an inability to understand what is happening. It is also possible that the individual has had a traumatic experience in the past with an ambulance, fire truck, or first responder. The person may not understand typical social rules, so he or she may be dressed oddly, invade your space, stand further away from you than typical, or not make eye contact. It's best not to point out or try to change these behaviors unless absolutely necessary. If it is necessary to touch the person, let them know what you will be doing and how it will feel before you touch them. If possible, take time to explain the instruments you are using. For example, when using the pulse ox, take 30 seconds to show them how it works and let them do a quick reading on you. Then, let them have their turn.
Here are a number of suggestions that may help you to communicate more effectively with a person with a cognitive impairment. Again, we acknowledge that you may not have time to employ these practices in certain circumstances. Nevertheless, there are a number of ways to facilitate communication when you do have the time. Listen carefully to the person and his or her family. The person and those closest to him or her are the experts on the person's behavior and functioning and may have crucial insights to share with you. Some people with disabilities and their families have taken a proactive approach and developed an emergency disaster preparedness plan. So you may want to ask if they already have an emergency plan. Always speak to the individual first, even if you are unsure that they will be able to understand you. Give them a chance to respond, and if they are unable, seek assistance from a caregiver or family member if available.
I'm a mother of an adult with autism. She is 22. And then I'm also a nurse, and I've been a nurse for 28 years. Because she's not verbal, people equate that instantly with lack of intelligence. Even though she's not making eye contact with you and she's not really appearing to listen to you, she hears everything and she understands everything. Well, what typically happens in the situations is they talk to me, they don't talk to her. They don't explain to her what's happening. They need to explain to her, and I've seen that when the EMS comes into the ER a lot. With people with disabilities, they talk around them. They talk to the caregiver, but they don't talk to the child or the adult. A lot of times they do understand, and you need to take the time to explain to them what's going on, because even if they're not really absorbing it, they get the tone.
Put yourself at eye level with the individual. If they are sitting, try to sit or kneel. Be empathetic and reassuring. Show that you have heard them and care about what they have told you. When giving directions, give one step at a time. Use clear language that is concise and to the point. Avoid jargon, acronyms, and slang. Be aware that the individual may take what you say literally. For example, phrases such as "get on the ground" or "don't move a muscle" may be confusing to someone with autism spectrum disorder. In their mind, of course, they are already standing on the ground. You may need to repeat instructions or questions. If the person does not seem to understand, try rephrasing your statement or question. Allow extra time for the person to respond. The person may repeat what you have said, repeat the same phrase over and over, talk about topics unrelated to the situation, or have an unusual or monotone voice. This is an attempt to communicate or to self-soothe and is not meant to irritate you or be disrespectful. Be aware that the individual may be eager to please you and may be inclined to agree with statements that you make. You can confirm the person understands what you are saying by rephrasing your question or statement. Phrase it as a question with a negative tone and later with a positive tone without changing your facial expression. First, does your arm hurt? Later, does your arm feel okay? Be patient. Rushing the person causes additional stress and may interfere with the person's ability to provide you with worthwhile information. If the situation is not life-threatening, it may be helpful to find common ground to discuss. If you are in the person's home, scan the room quickly to see if there is anything that you could comment on to show interest and caring. For example, if the person has a musical poster, you could say, "I see that you like music. I do too. What's your favorite song?" This is a relatively quick way to help the person to open up and begin communicating with you. Establishing this rapport will reduce anxiety and improve cooperation.
Allie was pretty frightened, so I think the most important thing at that point was just gaining her trust so that she would allow them to do their job.
Well, I was very brave not to think about it. Well, they do really ask me what I do towards Justin Jason because they're a really nice guy. I feel safe around Justin Jason because they are my high friends.
When interviewing a person with a cognitive impairment, it is important to determine the person's level of understanding. You may ask the person to read or write something for you to help you assess this. For example, you could ask the person to write down their name or address. It can also help to find out where the person lives, works, or goes to school, and if they have someone that supports them in those environments. Be mindful that people with some types of intellectual disabilities may be eager to please and could be easily influenced by you. False confessions and accusations may be an issue. Avoid difficult what questions, such as why did you do that or what made you do that. These reasoning questions may be difficult to process.
Sensory concerns. Some people with cognitive impairments, particularly people with autism spectrum disorders, experience significant adverse reactions to sensory stimuli. Your arrival at the scene may cause additional stress or disorientation due to sirens, lights, and radio noises. Stressful situations may be a trigger for behaviors that seem disruptive or unusual. When possible, the following actions can improve your interaction. Consider turning off your dispatch radio or turning down the volume if possible. If this is not possible, tell the individual about the radio and why they hear so much talking. Avoid shining flashlights in the person's eyes. Pupil response checks are an exception to this, but should be minimized. If possible, ask a family member for guidance on the best way to interact with the person. Some people have such extreme sensory sensitivity that regular sounds, lights, or touches may be painful to them.
If she gets really scared, she'll start to make like a crooning noise, and it can escalate the more frightened she is. She also does some of the self-injurious behavior, and it's a very common one where she hits her head. Well, people's instinct is to hold her hand or make her stop that, but the problem with that is she's soothing herself with that, and so if you do that, it keeps escalating.
Touch the person as little as possible. If it is necessary to touch a person who has a sensory sensitivity, firm pressure is usually preferred over a light touch. Responders should clearly and calmly tell the individual what they are doing and why, reassuring the person that they are there to help.
Avoid the use of restraints unless necessary for the individual or the responder. Never use prone restraints, since these can restrict breathing and are potentially dangerous.
If the person is showing obsessive or repetitive behaviors or seems fixated on a topic or object, it is rarely a good idea to interfere with their preoccupation. Be alert to the possibility of outbursts or unexplained behavior. If the person is not harming themselves or others, give them space until they calm down. The exception, of course, is if the behavior is dangerous to the person or to others.
One of the things, and I know this is going to sound really silly, is they need to smile more. Because when I think about those emergency situations, we're all making those real serious faces. Those kids and adults pick up on that really quickly. And they don't feel okay. They don't feel okay at all. And that's when we start to see the repetitive behaviors or the self-injurious behaviors, because they're scared and you're ramping them up. And the biggest thing you have to do is take a deep breath yourself and calm down, because it makes them calmer, and you need to smile.
Mental illness. Perhaps of all disabilities, mental illness is the most stigmatized. However, mental illness is far more common than most people realize. Almost 20% of American adults had a mental illness. Nearly 1 in 20 adults in the United States had a serious mental illness, which was considered to substantially interfere with or limit one or more major life activities. Mental illnesses are simply illnesses of the brain, just like any other type of physical illness. A mental illness does not reflect a character flaw on the part of the individual, nor does it indicate a deficit in intelligence. Symptoms of mental illness may include changes in mood, personality, or personal habits, social withdrawal, confusion about reality, extreme sadness, or anxiety.
According to the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, it is estimated that people with severe mental illness are 4 times more likely to be killed by police than those without mental illness. However, contrary to popular belief, a person with a mental illness does not pose a greater threat to a police officer than anyone else. Police encounters with a person with a mental illness could potentially be dangerous, but the reality is they usually are not. If you suspect that someone has a mental illness, it is important to remain patient and calm to avoid escalating the situation. There is a police training program called CIT, Crisis Intervention Teams, which is a 40-hour program that educates law enforcement on how to better respond to people experiencing a mental health crisis. If possible, always call in a CIT-trained officer when responding to a person with a mental illness. CIT programs are started and sustained at the local level. If you are not aware of a CIT program in your area, you can contact your local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, for information about how to start a CIT program.
It is often assumed that a person with a mental illness is dangerous or will be violent. The wide range of behaviors associated with mental illness varies from passivity to disruptiveness. Even when the illness is active, most individuals with mental illness pose no risk to themselves or others. If you are assisting someone with a mental illness, keep the following things in mind. If someone with a mental illness gets upset, ask calmly if there is anything you can do to help, and then respect their wishes. If the person is delusional, don't argue with them or try to talk them out of it. Just let them know you are there to help them. Try to avoid interrupting a person who might be disoriented or rambling. Just let the person know that you have to move quickly.
People with dementia may become confused and agitated if they don't understand the nature of the emergency or activity around them. Their understanding of the situation may wax and wane, and they might try to appear as if they understand when they do not. Be patient, calm, reassuring, and respectful. Even when a person is confused and disoriented, they are likely to notice and resent being patronized. Some elderly persons may respond more slowly to a crisis and may not fully understand the extent of the emergency. Repeat questions and answers if necessary. Taking time to listen carefully or to explain again may take less time than dealing with a confused and uncooperative person. Many older people are reluctant or afraid to leave their homes because they do not believe they will be returned home. Reassure the person that you are there to help them, and any relocation will be temporary. Before moving an elderly person, assess their ability to see and hear. You may need to adapt rescue techniques for sensory impairments. Remember that hearing loss is common in the elderly. Persons with a hearing loss may appear disoriented and confused when the problem is that they cannot hear you. Determine if the person has a hearing aid. If they do, is it available and working? If it isn't, can you get a new battery to make it work?
MedicAlert and Safe Return is a 24-hour nationwide emergency response service for people with dementia. People who are part of this program will be wearing a MedicAlert bracelet or necklace. If you encounter a person who you believe has dementia and may be lost, call 1-800-625-3780 for help. The hotline can connect you with local resources and provide advice. If the person is part of the Safe Return program, the hotline will also be able to provide you with medical information and contact information for the individual's caregiver. Call the hotline for guidance whether or not the person is wearing a MedicAlert tag, and share information about this resource with the family of the individual with dementia. Check our resource list for more information.